So, tell me, Reverend James,
Yes.
how do you feel about Cher?
Love share.
Welcome to the Shepcast.
Welcome to the Sharecast.
Probably. Oh, welcome to the Bible's not very important to you, is it, Mr. Fumbles?
I dropped the pastor's desk diary, not the Bible.
Oh, good. Phew, I was worried.
I mean, like,
Is it really 11:30?
Yes.
Wow.
I do like the Lutheran pastor's desk diary because it has all the important saints' days in it, unlike your standard Grandin Toy desk diary that only has like Christmas and Easter.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, this one's got all the little piddly saints' days.
It's true.
It is quite smoky out there.
was-
My wife checked the weather this morning. She's like, "What? It doesn't like on the radar? There's no clouds, but I can't see the sun." I'm
Yeah.
like, "Yeah, well, how about that? It's the smoke cast."
It's the smoke cast, but not like the, because that's bad for you.
Welcome to the Shepcast.
Welcome to the Shepcast.
Today, for the eagle-eyed Lutherans amongst you, it is the feast day of Saint James the Elder.
Just like you.
This upcoming Sunday. And we are excited for it because there are many saints' days that can easily get overlooked, forgotten, under-considered, and we're happy to bring them back to add a frisson of variety to the church liturgical year.
Unlike last week where it was not a frisson, it was a friesen.
That's true. We have no guest host today unless one miraculously shows up, but I would be surprised. I would be more likely to assume that it is just myself and Amanda. Hopefully Amanda will make it all the way through the Shepcast today.
Hopefully I don't get a call halfway through saying, hey, remember that you said you were going to do that? Whoopsie.
Well, hopefully not. And let's talk about our readings for today because we have, instead of it being the typical Old Testament epistle gospel, we have a reading from Acts instead. Acts, Romans, and Mark. Are you using your Lutheran Study Bible?
I am. I am back to my huge.
I am not.
Well, you don't have a huge.
True enough. But we're going to play some roulette here because I got my parallel Bible. So I will either be reading out of the NIV or the Message. And it depends. It's going to be roulette. It's going to be like a coin flip lucky dip.
So I'll be doing all the readings for today.
What if I do NIV?
I mean, that could be good, but otherwise I might just be sad.
Well, why don't I read from the book of Acts 11:27 to 12:5.
Cool. How about if you do that?
I shall. Why is it that our Bibles don't go Matthew, Mark, John, Luke, Acts?
Why would they?
Because Acts
Oh,
is the
follows
continuation of
Luke, yeah.
It's one story.
I mean, I would assume because they have the three synoptic together and then John off on its own.
I guess, but boo. All right. It was about this same time that some prophets came to Antioch from Jerusalem. One of them, named Agabus, stood up one day and, prompted by the Spirit, warned that a severe famine was about to devastate the country. The famine eventually came during the rule of Claudius. So the disciples decided that each of them would send whatever they could to their fellow Christians in Judea to help out. They sent Barnabas and Saul to deliver the collection to the leaders in Jerusalem. That's when King Herod got it into his head to go after some of the church members. He murdered James, John's brother, when he saw how much it raised his popularity rating with the Jews. He arrested Peter. All this during Passover week, mind you. And had him
You
thrown
switched to the Message.
It was the Message consistently.
Even before?
Yes.
Oh, geez. Sorry.
And had him thrown in jail, putting 4 squads of 4 soldiers each to guard him. He was planning on a public lynching after Passover. All that time, Peter was under heavy guard in the jailhouse. The church prayed for him most strenuously. Well, okay, so hold on, pump your brakes for a second. James the Elder, James, brother of John, son of Zebedee, fisherman, executed for his Christian witness. The government of Herod is not, like, Herod's been Herod and the Herodian family have been pretty powerful opponents of the Christian mission from like even its conception.
Oh, yeah, I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
So is this the same
No, it's
Herod?
different Herod.
But is it the same Herod who beheaded John?
Yes.
Okay.
That's the same Herod. It gets confusing because they're like all called Herod.
Well, I mean, as royal families tend to do, right? You have the name repeated throughout
over and over
the
and
generations.
over and over again. But they're all called Herod, and they're all up to no good. And Herod is a great example of a ruler who exercises the kind of like first century power that rulers would have. Like, this isn't a democracy. It's basically a dictatorship, and Herod can do what he wants. And Herod does not view himself as being bound by petty morality. Like, when people complain about the rules not being followed by the wealthy and the powerful, this is part of what they're talking about, is that King Herod can just do what he wants.
Right.
And no one stops him. Right? If Herod wants you arrested, you're getting arrested. If Herod wants you gone, you're gone. You will get disappeared. You will get removed. Nothing's stopping that from happening. That there's no way in this life or the next that any of Herod's yes men are going to stand up to him and say, you probably shouldn't kill John the Baptist. You probably shouldn't kill James the Elder. Like, they're going to kill him because this is how power and control are consolidated. You get rid of your rivals. You make them disappear. And you make them disappear aggressively and suddenly if necessary. And you do because even if it's not a democracy, it is. If you see what I mean. So, like, the fundamental check to unlimited royal power is the power of God, right? Like, all kings and queens, to our understanding, and if we lose this, by the way, it's a problem. But all kings and queens are deemed to be ruling by divine right, by the grace of God, right? Your king, your queen, your tetrarch, your ruler, whoever, your emperor, has been ordained for that position by Almighty God, which means that they don't have elections, they don't have popularity polls, you can't vote them out, that kind of thing. But conversely, they can be removed by the people still.
Right.
But they get removed violently.
Yeah.
So if you're just kind of like, picture Kim Campbell. Do you remember Kim Campbell? Mm-hmm. Because she would have been prime minister when you were being born or something like that.
I was quite young.
Quite young. But Kim Campbell was one of our shortest serving prime ministers. Not the shortest serving prime minister, but close to.
Who was the shortest?
Like John Turner or something like that, or Joe Clark.
Yeah.
But like they were both, like they were all pretty short-lived prime ministers. And Kim Campbell was quite short-lived herself. Only in power for like 60 days or something like that, and then removed. But the thing about Kim Campbell is there's really nothing at stake for her. Like, she goes from being like, picture it as the difference between a temp and the owner of the company. Like, there's a joke that was said about this, like on a comedy, like a stand-up comedy thing, where it was like somebody who was telling a joke about being a temp at an agency, and he's like, yeah, it's great being a temp, because at the end of the day, your manager comes over, he's like, wow, you sure screwed a lot of stuff up, and you say, yeah, I did. Sign my card? Like, there's nothing at risk, right? Like, if you're Kim Campbell and you mess up, like, you're the prime minister of the country, you're in charge of an awful, like, the prime minister of our country has a heck of a lot of power, like more than the president of the United States does within the country.
Right.
Not unlimited power, but pretty close. Kim Campbell shows up, bottoms out, takes her country from like 175 seats down to 2 seats, catastrophic loss, and oh well, just goes on with her life. No big deal. But if you're like the king or queen, and you are living in like open defiance against the laws of God, the rules of God, the presence and office that you are supposed to live in, and you mess up, like, you and your family get killed,
right,
or exiled. Like, it would happen quite frequently that people would like rise up against their rulers and like kill their kids in front of them. Like, it wasn't a straight democracy where the people got votes, but if you defied,
but they voted with their feet, essentially.
Right, they voted with their pitchforks.
Yeah,
right, is what they did. Like, you could get away with a lot, but if you went over the line, then there would be, as Pilate feared, there would be a riot,
right,
where people would all of a sudden rise up against their rulers and depose them violently. And that was the way of reestablishing rule. So for Herod's well aware that he's like, yes, he has enormous power, but he rules by popularity still, that he can be removed violently by the people that he governs.
Well, and the other thing that we're looking at too is that the Christian people here are teaching about another king, about a king who's more powerful. And as we saw with Herod, not this one, but the one at the time of Jesus' birth, he feared there being a king who would be more powerful than he was, right? He wants to remove that threat. He wants to make it so that he still remains the most powerful king. So he's going to try and remove the people who are teaching about another king, who are trying to get everyone to follow a different king, you know, the king of the Jews, the king of the entire world.
This is a massive check to unfettered political power, though, is the idea that you are still subject to the laws of God. Because if you have a godless nation that has given up on God and the rule of God and the presence of God, that kind of, if you've got a kingdom that's given up on that, then you as the king can do what you want and you can do as you please. You can change the laws to fit yourself and nobody can stop you, because what are they going to do? Right? Like, they are not going to appeal to any higher authority. Because if we're just saying in our country, for example, that the prime minister should only do things that are ethical and good and right and honorable and so on, but we have no actual measurement for what that is, they can do what they want.
Because that changes day by day.
It changes day by day, moment by moment. If you're like, well, the king should just do, and like this is, I've said this before and I'll say it again, it's a Pierre Elliott Trudeau line where he was getting in trouble for commanding, this is during the FLQ crisis, he was getting in trouble for having the RCMP going in and burning barns on like private land to try and flush the FLQ out. And somebody mentioned to him, they said, isn't it a problem that you're having the RCMP going in there and burning down barns? That's illegal. And Trudeau Senior said, well, if it's illegal to burn down these barns, then we'll just make it legal to burn them down.
Yeah.
Like, we'll just change the laws to fit what we want to do. And like, for the powerful, that's the great seductive lure that's in front of them, right? You can just change the law. You can just change petty morality to fit what you want to do.
Just watch me.
Because then it's not a crime. Then it's not illegal. Then it's not immoral, because you can change the laws, the moralities, the whatever, to try and fit where you're at. And the laws of God act as a great restraint on the wealthy and the powerful, because it compels them to operate at the behest of a set of rules that they cannot alter. They can't just reach in and strike out the 10 Commandments with the stroke of a pen. They can't do it. They're etched into stone. They're in everybody's homes, and everybody will judge you accordingly, or at least should. Right? That's the way that the system is supposed to work, that you and I and everybody else should read, mark, learn, and understand the laws of God well enough to the point that if our rulers, our leaders are acting not in accordance with those, that we will, in our system, vote them out, but in like the medieval peasantry, we'll violently remove them.
Right.
You cannot get away with like completely flouting the laws of God in perpetuity. And in cases where you do, the corruption gets so deep and so massive, it never quits. Like, it just, things are so corrupt for such a long time, just this massively corrupt system where everybody will just live in corruption and try not to worry about it too much. But it's a vile place,
Right.
of unease and disruption, because people will just try and get into power and then try and hold on to that power as long as they can, because it benefits them to do so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was a little bit disappointed with your translation for many reasons, but
Almost all of them, in fact.
in verse 1 of chapter 12, yours very much sanitized it. It was saying, in my translation, it said, Herod the king laid violent hands on some who belonged to the church. And like, the imagery of that is exactly what you would expect to fit the rest of the passage, right? Where it's violent hands being laid upon them. It's not like a innocuous thing. It's not just quietly disposing. Yeah, it's just that he is laying violent hands. Like, violence is happening. It's not happening quietly and smoothly, that he's just sweeping them under the carpet, right? It is under the rug. It is violent. It is a big deal.
We sort of forget very quickly how that was like a regular thing. That was not unusual. It was not strange to have people taken away and violently executed as an example to everybody else. that like that was a regular thing that could and would happen. And if it was a popular thing to do, like when Pontius Pilate is saying, I'm going to release one of these guys, okay, they choose Barabbas, well then what am I going to do with this Jesus guy? Crucify him. Mm-hmm. The crowd's in charge.
It's not sanitized then, right? Like everybody knows what is happening. And like even here, it's a very brief tale, right? Like it simply says he killed James, the brother of John, with the sword. But then, as you're saying, and it pleased the Jews. And so he proceeded to arrest Peter as well.
This is how you shore up your continued reign. Because you are really, like, even though you're reigning at the pleasure of the Romans, you're really reigning at the pleasure of the people who are there.
Oh, for sure, because it's going to depend on the region that you're at, right?
Yep. And if they want, like, if they're liking you murdering these people, that's great for you. Mm-hmm. Then you can keep on living fat and happy in your palace, taking baths in ass's milk or whatever you got to do. And as long as you kill the right people, you're pretty well fine. Yep. They want you to kill the people that they want dead, and you're going after them, and they're happy.
Because, of course, the Christians aren't generally the powerful people, right? Like
certainly not here.
No, like when we're seeing them here, they're the people who, even so, that everyone according to his ability to send relief to the brothers. So, like, they're working together. First off, they're not trying to assert dominance, right? They're trying to work together to create a community, which is easy to cut down at this point, right? You're not dealing with powerful people trying to gain more power. You're dealing with people trying to help one another.
Yes, you are. Yes, you are. This carries over pretty well to the modern church, insofar as the modern church, the people in the church are supposed to know the scriptures well enough that your ministers can't go way far off what the Bible says.
Right.
Like they shouldn't be able to, because you should be acting as the natural check to that. They will give you some things that you don't want to hear. Every minister does. But your knowledge of and immersion in the scriptures should prevent them from going way far outside, in the same way that it's supposed to prevent you from having rulers that go way outside this, right? Like that's supposed to be the natural check on things, to say no further, because there are good things to be considered in God's rule and God's kingdom, that we recognize and understand that there are laws we can't change, and we have to operate within those. And to the ministers in your church, you should say, there are things in the scriptures that we can't change. And if you attempt to do so, we can't have you preaching here. Mm-hmm. Very simple stuff, right? Not complicated. And in the Christian worldview, I guess, so much power rests in the hands of the people that if your king is ruling by divine right, then that king is responsible for the laws, to the laws of God, and has to be held to account on those. And when the president of the United States swears his oath of office on the Bible, he is indeed putting himself subject to the laws of God on that one. He's saying, I am ruling at the good pleasure of God Almighty himself. And should I contravene these laws, there are certain things, laws outside of my capacity to change. And Herod is going to go and try and forget that, right? Mm-hmm. He's going to assume, well, but I can change the laws because I'm me. But everybody assumes that. Mm-hmm. The laws of God have to be binding for like literally everybody. Otherwise, what's the point? And you can try and silence James the Elder by killing him with the sword. But guess who's still exercising authority today? Is it Herod the Great? Herod the Tetrarch? Or is it some random fisherman?
Yeah.
Because we're not, the only reason we're still talking about Herod is through the lens of the people he persecuted.
Right.
Not as a great guy on his own. Nobody's talking about wow, sure loved that Herod. He was great.
Right.
Herod,
he was just a name to tie Christianity to a point in history, basically.
Yeah, he's an actor in the story, but he's not one that anybody views as being a good dude.
He's not the hero.
No, he's in every way the villain, because he's only seen in modes of persecution of the church.
But he's not even the main villain.
No, he's definitely a sub-villain.
Yeah.
But
he's one of the henchmen,
which is not what he would want to be.
No, of course not, because he, the reason why these guys are killed is or imprisoned is because he's trying to assert his power, and all that's happening is that he's losing it, essentially.
I'm putting a clip of Herod back in here, the same as I did last 2 weeks ago, where I put a clip of Herod in.
Okay.
From Jesus Christ Superstar. Maybe I'll put
Oh.
in the old one instead of the new one. They're both fine. They're both the best bit of the whole musical. But it's worth remembering that he's impotently angry because he really isn't the prime villain. He's not the prime mover. He's not the prime shaker. He has some authority, but not much. Even in terms of when Jesus is sent to Herod, Herod sends him right back to Pilate. It's like, well, here you go. What do I do with this guy?
Yeah.
Like Herod he's the sub boss. He's the mid-level henchman. He's the muscle, but he's not the big deal that he thinks he is.
No.
And history only ever remembers him as being like a side character in all this. He's not the focus, even though he would have thought in his palace, in his glory and majesty, he would have assumed that he was going to be and like he was trying to hold on to that as the position of being the prime mover, the prime shaker. And yet nobody ever thinks about Herod, King Herod, as being like, wow, the most important part of this story.
No.
He is only seen as a side character to the main movers and shakers in the scriptures. And apart from that, he's a total footnote. And it's doubly funny because who amongst the Tetrarchs or the governors of Judea does anybody remember? Only the ones that were around during like the scriptural phase.
Right.
Apart from that, like who else? I mean, like I know some random classicist is going to be like writing in the comments, well, have you forgotten about whoever else it would have been? Who knows? Doesn't matter. Yeah, we did. Everybody did.
Yeah, for sure.
For good
You've
reason.
got Nebuchadnezzar and Herod, and who else do you got, right?
Well, because who cares?
Yeah.
Like these people are only important insofar as they interact with the kingdom of God, because that's the important part. Everything else, like all these powers and rulers and dominions, it's just like Ozymandias again. The sonnet by Percy Bysshe Shelley that talks about, he says, a traveler, I'm going to get the words wrong, but a traveler that I once met said, I went out into the desert and I saw these 2 legs of stone and a face that had fallen off this statue and one arm sticking out, and the plinth at the bottom said, my name is Ozymandias, King of Kings. Look on my works, ye mighty, and despair, and nothing else remains. And all around us was just whirling sand. The implication being that at the time, Ozymandias wanted you to look on his works and despair because he was so wealthy and powerful, but eventually there's nothing left, just dust and a face in the sand, and that's all. And like that's where Herod is. Meanwhile,
Right.
2,000 years later, we're talking only about the people that he wanted to persecute.
Right.
And St. James the Elder has a feast day, and King Herod does not, for these reasons.
Indeed.